Welcome back to the Intentional Household Podcast. Today we have an incredible guest joining us, Dr. Sarah Breen. Balancing a high-pressure career, entrepreneurship, and family life is no easy task, but Sarah does it all with intention and purpose. She's not only a pediatrician with over 13 years of experience in medicine and leadership, but also the co-founder and COO of the F.I.T, all while being a dedicated mom to 2 sons. Sarah brings a wealth of knowledge and personal experience when it comes to structuring time, managing stress, and building a thriving entrepreneurial household. She understands the challenges of juggling multiple roles, and today she's here to share her insights on how to navigate it all while maintaining balance and well-being. This conversation is going to be filled with practical strategies, mindset shifts, and real-life takeaways for anyone looking to create a more intentional, fulfilling approach to work, family, and personal growth. Sarah, welcome to the podcast. We're so excited to have you here. Sarah, when we first met, it was actually at the Strategic Coach Couples Connection, and you had just made the announcement to Justin, your husband, and the group of 100 people that you were going to transition from working as a pediatrician to working with Justin at the F.I.T, your company. Can you tell us a little bit about what motivated you to make that change and that big leap?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was kind of a lot of things put together. When I turned 40, I started to just feel like I needed something more. I was looking for something different, bigger picture, bigger life. At the Strategic Coach weekend, there were multiple different little things that just kind of happened and made me think, wait a minute. Justin and I are very different, which I obviously knew. That wasn't a surprise. But I thought all of a sudden, I was like, wait a minute, our strengths and weaknesses basically line up. And we had done, obviously, the Colbys together and the Prince together, and everything is mismatched in a good way. And so I figured the pieces that he was potentially lacking, I could pick up on. And maybe I would enjoy. I had no idea. I've been in medicine for so long. I had no idea if I was going to enjoy this or not. But I thought, hey, let's give it a shot, see if I can help out, and we'll go from there.
Well, it really was a big leap because you and Justin, like you said, are very different. And so as much as you two have worked together in your household and raising your boys, it's very challenging working with a spouse. So I was going to ask what strategies or tools you've used to allow you two to work together. You mentioned the Colby and Print. I'm wondering if there's anything else or any strategies that allow you to work together and for your working together to not affect the home front in your relationship with the kids.
Yeah, it's definitely harder. We're still, figuring all of that out because our communication styles are very different, and what we need in communication is very different. So one thing that I wanted before I started working with him was that we preemptively start couples therapy so that we could work on that piece because I knew it was going to be a problem. I can promise you that for the 20 years I've known him, I never wanted to work with him ever. So it was.
Yeah, I believe that. I mean, not because of Justin, but because of my own husband
Oh,
and what it's
yeah.
like working with your husband.
It's alarming when you make that choice. And it was shocked me as much as it shocked him. And so that was one piece I thought would preemptively help us. The other thing for me, which is a little different from you, is that there was a third party. And so it wasn't just my husband and I starting this company, there was a third partner. And most of my time was spent working with him. I eventually hired an assistant. So a lot of what we do is very separate. We have strengths, obviously, in very different parts of the business. And so for us, keeping a lot of what the minutia separate
Hmm.
has been extremely
Hmm.
helpful.
Yeah. So you two were both able to work toward the vision, but separately
Yeah,
to reduce that conflict and stress.
correct.
Yeah. Which I can very much relate to as well. That's like Alex and I. we can work toward a common goal, but we have to work toward the goal separately because it just ends up in chaos.
Yeah. I mean, it's just the way that you guys are different is similar to the way that we are different. And I think, things that seem natural to you and I are just a problem to, I mean, it's just very, I don't even know how to explain it other than the fact that things that you and I are like, oh, well, we see this, and this. And they're like, not a problem, move on. And it gets very contentious if you do work so closely together.
Yeah, it really can. From your experience, both as a pediatrician and entrepreneur, what do you see are some of the biggest challenges parents face working in high pressure roles or jobs?
Great question. And I mean, unequivocally, boundaries. So, boundaries for self care, boundaries around your family time, uh, you know, especially if you're a woman, there it comes with guilt, lots of, mom guilt. So, I would say, definitely just having the ability to be able to boundary your time in some way to make sure that you're able to take care of yourself and to do the things that you want to do, aka live intentionally, is the biggest challenge. And I think it's a constant challenge for people.
For those who do deal with guilt, how or what would you suggest to them? Because it's very hard to get over guilt, especially as moms. And I'm sure you, Sarah, have had a lot of guilt yourself. So how are you able to overcome it or deal with it so that you recognize that self-care is important? And to what extent are you willing to make sacrifices that may affect your own personal self and self-care?
Sure. I mean, it's always been a work in progress and it always will be. I think you have to give yourself grace as well because there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be days where, you are going to feel guilty. I started my career for 10 years. I worked full time in pediatrics. So 10 years of, and I'm still a pediatrician now, but very, very part time. And that is a form of self care for me and less guilt because the full time I mean, it was like a rat race, get the kids ready, get them out the door, get me to work. I'm exhausted by the time I come home, hopefully, making dinner, all the things. It just was a constant flow. And I, for a long time, felt guilty about working out because I did not want to. Again, I'm full-time working mom. So how do I then say, oh, I'm going to take more time away from my kids and go work out? And I distinctly remember asking people, how did you find the time to work out when your kids were so little and you were working? And people would just say, oh, well, it was important to us. And of course, for my husband, he doesn't think about it. And I know, a lot of men that I've talked to are, oh, well, we don't have the same guilt feeling that you do as a mom. We understand what you're saying, but we don't feel that way. And so it took a long time for me to be comfortable saying, hey, like this is important to me. I ended up, joining a plan that was online to work out with,
Okay.
so that I could do it at home. So was able to take care of myself, but there wasn't the guilt involved in all the extra travel or, not being here. And as I grow and as they grow, I think the biggest thing to remember, and especially again, hoarding from my peds skills as well, they're watching you. And more than what you say is what you do. And I would say that it's if you wouldn't want your child to treat themselves as they grow up the way that you do, then don't do it. Make time for yourself. Show them that it's important to have a social life. It's important to have, these workout time for yourself. And we work out with our kids. We run 5Ks together. So there's some of that piece that's there as well, which is awesome. But for those of you who can't do that, showing them that it's important is just as important as telling them, if not more.
I completely agree because not only are you benefiting working out yourself, but ultimately you are role modeling that behavior to your kids. And if you are always working out at a time when they don't see it and you aren't communicating that you're working out or you're doing different forms to take care of yourself, then how will they do that for themselves? Because they aren't seeing their own parent as taking care of themselves. So it is great. There is the aspect for you to benefit personally, but then for your kids to understand the importance of it just by observation. Beyond working out, are there any strategies that you do to avoid burnout?
Oh, yes. Definitely. So I now have my hands in a lot of things. So like I said, I'm a part-time pediatrician still. I am running the F.I.T community, and I'm also starting a venture to help women who suffer from imposter syndrome and lacking boundaries and all of the burnout. So we are working on my partner and I are going to be creating some retreats and a community around that as well. So I have said yes to a lot of things, and also have, by the way, 2 young children and 3 dogs and a home. So I would say that for me, a lot of the boundaries lie in when I choose to work on these projects and when I choose to give my kids full time. But I also take time. I love reading. So I take time to read every day. Like I said, I do work out every day, but I mix that up with some yoga and meditation as well. I love to travel, and I love to just sit there and pet my dogs and stare sometimes and drink coffee. So I try to really, keep work within specific hours. Part of that is having an amazing assistant who can say no for me because I am a yes person. So her boundarying my time has been really helpful. And I self care in all kinds of different ways, depending on what I need at the moment.
I love that, Sarah, because if you or an individual has a hard time with boundaries, it's amazing that you have your personal assistant there and she can actually assist with that, right? So you're actually outsourcing that
Mhm.
aspect to make it easier for yourself. And I love the idea of the community. I can't wait to hear more about that because I would love to potentially join that.
Yes, I'm really excited. I think that, there's so many women in this, in your community, in the entrepreneurial world, or just professional women in general, who it's just different. They just need different things, and having a group of women to support you and to push you in the positive direction is just so important.
It is. You mentioned structuring your day and spending time with your boys. So, how do you structure it so that, things may come up with your boys? They have many extracurricular activities. How are you able to fit that in so that your work doesn't interfere with time with them and their activities?
Yeah, it's not always easy. I think, for me, it's helpful to be running offices from home, essentially, to have, when I'm in the pediatrics office, I really can't. There was a day last week where my husband was out of town and my son was sick and I was scheduled to work. So I brought him with me. And he laid in a room like a pitiful old man, and it was fine. I mean, you just,
Whatever it takes.
yeah. And, my staff is amazing at work. So it was great. There was no issue, but it's, it's kind of learning to roll with things. And also, you know, I think coming from a medical background, I see things as very much non-emergent when it comes to running my other businesses. And I do want to make time for everybody, but I think people actually respect you more when you do have boundaries around your kids and around your family time. You are correct. They are in travel baseball, travel soccer, flag football, cross country, all the things. So we are kind of running, and I boundary my meetings around their actual school time. So when they're in school is when I take meetings from home, and anything else, again, things come up, but for the most part, I go to every single one of my kids' games now. I drive them to practices, I Uber all night long, as most of us do. And it just is my priority. It's just going to go so fast that I love that time with them. I think being with them when they're in the car is actually, and you'll probably attest to this as your kids are getting older now too, it's when they tell you the most. It's when you can listen to them talk to their friends and hear about all the drama at school. And having two boys, thankfully, we don't have a ton of drama, but I hear about everyone else's. And I wouldn't give that up for the world.
And we have to share how old your sons are.
Oh, yes. So I have a sixth grader who is 12. His name's Jake. And then a fifth grader who is 10. His name's Chase. And they are, they're so much fun. But like I said, there's just no way I would give up this time with them.
No, it flies by far too quickly.
Yeah.
So you were talking about driving them, and, let's get into the household and those tasks and responsibilities. How are you or how do you and Justin divide those responsibilities and tasks?
Oh, okay. Well, honestly, I wouldn't say divide. He will agree. I do 99% of the work here. He'll throw some laundry in, he'll do some dishes. He's not, he does help, for sure. But for the most part, when it comes to, and I am relatively particular on, I like my kids to have healthy meals. I like my kids to, food and sleep are two of my trigger points where I don't have a lot of wiggle room because likely of my training, but I want my kids to have good, healthy meals and I want them to sleep well. Those are things that I don't really compromise on. So when it comes to that, it's probably easier that I do it. We do have help when it comes to cleaning the house. We had a nanny when I was working full time and she was amazing. And she did a lot of prep work and cleaning for me. And so that was awesome. And my biggest gift to myself was a few years ago when I hired somebody to come and clean out all of the rooms and just make everything a lot more friendly because I have a heart that's not my strength. And I'm not an organizer, a professional organizer. That's what I should say. That was extremely helpful to me to just have somebody else go through my entire house and get rid of all of the junk that didn't need to be there. And I still am grateful for that.
It's amazing how liberating it feels to have the space cleared out. And you don't have to be the one to do it. Someone else can do it, but you come home and it's organized and it is more like cleared out and it feels amazing. And it really helps with the mental health.
Yes,
and the
it
stress.
is shocking the amount of, and it was during, I came home, COVID is when I stopped working full time. And, when you're stuck in your house for a couple of weeks or a couple of months or whatever it is, you look around and you're like, oh my God, why is it all coming at me? And so it was too big of a project for me. And I agree. I completely agree with you. There's no better feeling than coming home to a clean, condensed house that's not coming at you.
Condensed, yes. And we talked in a previous episode, we had a home organizer come and she was talking about the benefits of her coming in and doing it because like you said, it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
And right, like that's not your skill set. You could have attempted, but it probably would have taken you twice the amount of time as your person and a lot more stress.
Correct. And the way that they do it, they create systems so you don't mess it up again. And that was what I was asking. I said, hey, when you come in, I'm like, that's great. I can leave it like that for a week, but I'm going to destroy this again. So how do we make sure? And so professional organizers are great because they come up with systems and bins and like I said, all the things that you're probably good at because that seems very much Laura, but not me. So it's kind of knowing your skill set and what you're willing to, like you say, what you're willing to do, which tasks are something that you're not willing to give up, but something that you are willing to give up. And it's just so much more important to have somebody else do it so you can spend time with your family or on your business or whatever it is.
Yeah, I like how you recognize the items that you don't want to give up because so initially you said, well, you take care of most of the household items because the food and the sleeping is a priority to you.
Correct.
But then it sounds like you have found support through other people. So it might not be Justin doing it. but it also might not be you doing it. You might take ownership of it, but it sounds like you have brought in other people to support you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was going to ask if you are doing 100% of it or 99%, how you are able to do it without feeling resentful. Because I can imagine if one person is doing most of it,
Mm-hmm.
resentment does arise with the partner.
Oh, for sure. And I think, number one is when you have kids that are the age that my kids are too, is getting them involved and making sure my kids have weekly chores, they have daily things that they do. When I started to get resentful, I realized that the kids were also old enough to put away their own laundry. Does it look great? No. Do I care? Absolutely not. Because it's just at least it's done and I don't have to, because I can't physically do everything. So typically when I point things out, Justin will help, you know what I mean? Like I said, he does laundry, he does do dishes. There are actually certain things that I will leave on purpose because I'm just not going to do all of it.
Yeah,
That's kind of how
I agree.
instead of getting resentful, I'm not a person that the dishes in the sink bother me. So that's something that I will just leave until, because he will get around to it. He will get around to a lot of different things. I think it's just the way that sometimes men think versus women is very different. And so if there are certain things that you can let go of and say, hey, it doesn't have to be done perfectly as long as it's done at some point, then that's kind of how it is. And so it's a work in progress as well. We talk about that on and off because sometimes you just get used to doing everything and then all of a sudden the resentment builds up and then you say something. So you just have to kind of keep, encouraging and again, letting go of being so maybe the outcome being perfect.
I love that. And I agree with everything you're saying. As an example, in our household, so our youngest, he's 3. And despite his age, everyone is responsible for clearing their dishes at the dinner table, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And then often I am the one clearing the rest of the table. And the kids and I often have already cleared our dishes, and Alex's dishes are still there. And sometimes I will go to clear his dish. And he has said to me, no, leave the dish. Let me clear it because I want to make sure that the kids see me carrying my weight and role modeling clearing my dish as well. And you're right. If he doesn't clear his dish and then I just get in the habit of clearing his dishes, then now we've turned into the habit of me clearing my dishes, his dishes. And then the kids are seeing that the dad isn't clearing his dishes. So it's just about, making sure you don't do everything so that people don't always rely on you in the household and they're carrying their weight as well.
Yeah, it's so important because you want the household to run. If you were to get sick or something more, you want them to have ownership and be able to run the household as well without you. I mean, obviously not your 3-year-old. Maybe.
We'd be in big trouble. It sounds like you and Justin work really hard to be mindful of your own role modeling and getting your kids involved. As an entrepreneurial couple, I know from speaking with you that you also get your kids involved in your business as well and having them play a role in planning activities or just using their minds so that they are contributing to the business as well. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite things to talk about because that is actually one of my favorite parts of being an entrepreneur. No joke. I love the fact that our kids can be a part of this. This is something I never saw growing up. My dad, he owns his own business, but it was, a small business and just more business owner mindset, not big vision entrepreneur. And so to me, I learned about this world through my husband, and it's kind of like a magical fantasy world almost. Never said that, but I think that's accurate. I think
I agree with you, Sarah.
it is. It's like this magical fantasy world. And so being able to show our kids that they can do whatever they want, they can start whatever they want, but also to see the negatives. They're involved in all, and again, because we work together, they're involved in all the negative conversations too, the financial issues, the partnership issues, the member issues, anything like that, they hear us talking about. And I don't have a problem with that. I think it's important for them to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I think what you were referring to is that my younger son, our 10-year-old, he's got such a huge heart. And he has been involved with the philanthropy piece of our network. That was the piece that I had brought in last year after our trip to Necker Island, which was, by the way, the epitome of the fantasy world. And it's just such a positive mindset going from that and taking that to increasing our mark on the world. Our entire network is about forming impact together, working together to collaborate, to connect. And so a big piece of that for me has been in our impact portion as well. So every event that we have, we do something to impact the city for which we're in. And Chase, my 10-year-old, wants to be a part of that. So he was part of the last event we had was in Chicago, and he chose the charity. He planned the event. We packed backpacks for 200 underserved youth in Chicago, and we wrote them notes. And he took control of the event. He did the Q&A in the beginning about why it was important to him, what it meant to him. And then I had him take it back to his classroom, because I think the way that we live and the way that everyone else lives in terms of entrepreneur world and regular world, I mean, kids don't really get to plan an event and, in a school day, he missed school, and I wanted him to explain to his friends why, and maybe spark something in them as well. So I love that he's a part of it, and I love that, he's my helper.
That was such a great idea about having him take that back to school and share it. Because as amazing as the whole experience sounds like it was, having him plan it and be involved, the final step of now sharing it with his classmates is incredible.
Yeah, I think it's important to teach other people what you're doing as well. And as I'm saying that, I guess that's a medical training kind of thing too. That's the see one, do one, teach one kind of deal. And so why not? His teacher was thrilled. His teacher was thrilled that he missed school for it. She's amazing. And of course, what better learning is there than giving back and leading, by the way, a bunch of adults as a 10-year-old? I mean, that's impressive.
It is. And it goes to show that you really can't underestimate his ability.
Absolutely. And I run company names by him. He's all in for the women's network. He's like, Mom, this is the best idea out of all of them. It's like, this is going to help so many people. I mean, he's a little old man. And my oldest is fabulous too. It's just not his goal is sports right now. So, but it's, again, he's coming up with his own business ideas, and they think differently than I did at that age, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, same. I mean, because like you, entrepreneurship, I only really got into because of Alex. And I mean, certainly my grandpa had his restaurants growing up, but I didn't understand quite as much as I learned from Alex, and just like you with Justin, and a bit like you said with your dad. But it's just amazing to have him involved. And it'll just continue, and he'll be capable of even more year after year.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I'm excited for your kids too, as they're seeing you guys work together, and really what you're building it's for them. I mean, it's living intentionally. You're just showing the world that they can do it too.
100%. For parents who want to start role modeling work-life balance to their own kids and setting a positive example there, what do you think is one step they can start taking?
Yeah, good question. So I think it's a really important question. And I think that it's always going to be up and down with people. I think it's important to remember to do it and to have conversations like these so that you can remember to do it. I would say any small step is helpful, and it's one small step at a time, because if you're looking to make a big change, you may not do it. If you can do something little, like for instance, putting your phone down while you're with them. That's probably my favorite one, because you can be in the same room, you can be, in the same house. And if you're on your phone, you're not really present. And I think role modeling presence, especially in today's world where kids get iPhones too early and kids are addicted to social media, just like we are, at least we have the ability and the judgment skills to put it down. So unless something's truly an emergency, if you can even boundary that hour of dinner where there's no phones in the kitchen, boundary it at bedtime, there's no phones at bedtime. I think those are how I would start to, to be more present. And then in terms of self-care, true self-care is really, I think, just talking about it. I think you had mentioned it before. That's interesting because I hadn't really thought of that. When my kids were little, I used to wake up an hour before I would know they would wake up and get my workout in so that I wouldn't be bothered. They were like 2 and 3. So it was one of those things where it was what it was. But as they get older, saying, hey, I'm going to go do yoga, or I'm going to go do this, so that they know that you boundary your self-care as well. And just having those conversations and being very honest and open.
I love that. Okay, so back to phone use. I'm not sure if your sons have phones, but they don't have phones. Okay. And so I'd love to know, it sounds like you have boundaries in terms of meals. What are some of the other boundaries that you and Justin have when it comes to when you do use phones, when you don't use the phones around your kids?
Yeah, great question. My kids don't have phones because of me. Um, actually, actually, he hates them too. So they do have Apple Watches now, because as you get into middle school, I don't really want to make my middle schoolers plans for him anymore. Kind of over it. So they do have Apple Watches, and also really and truly that started so I could keep track of them and
Okay.
they could reach out to me and I could give them a little bit more freedom, because that's not my strong suit. But in any case, I am a big proponent of waiting on phones. I think that, I've seen so many third graders addicted to their phones, and I just, but they do play on iPad and they have screen time, but that all of that shuts down at the dinner table. We definitely don't do any meals with any screen time, and we never have. Um, when it comes to boundarying Justin and I's time with the phones, I think that that's always a work in progress. For him, for Justin, we've moved his office to the basement. That way, it was a real problem. Like, it was very real when my kids were toddlers. And again, they're only 20 months apart. So as you know, toddler bedtime is maybe the worst bedtime on earth, maybe the worst hour of ever. And so I had two of them who had their own nightly routines, and they were horrible. Whatever. It was awful. And he would work in the middle of our house. And so if any email pinged, he has zero patience, zero. So everything to him is an emergency. If an email pinged, he had to go get it. And I'm trying to put these kids to bed. It was legit chaos. Okay. I can go back to those emotions as we're talking. I haven't thought about it in a long time. So it's not good. So having him in the middle of our house working, and we have an open floor plan and it's not a big house. And so, there's no freedom for the kids to be kids either when they're awake. Well, they're too loud or they're too whatever. So moving him to a space where if the door was closed, he was working, has been a big change, because then when he does come up, his computer's not with him. And so, and we do try, he doesn't even have an Apple Watch. So if his phone's not near him, he doesn't see it. So that's been really helpful, because I would say he has more of an addictive personality. And so when it comes to those pings, we're all addicted to the noise and the feeling and the checking. But that's been really helpful. So boundarying where you work, especially if you work from the home, is really important. I know, putting your phone in do not disturb, that can help too. And for the kids, we will have the same rules. Their phones won't go into their rooms or anything like that. It's kind of a buildup with the watches, because they're so used to everything being in the kitchen where it's monitored, that it'll be a slow progression until we work on that.
And do you find that their friends have phones, or is it oh, they do.
Yeah, I don't
They
care.
do. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're used
I
to me.
wasn't sure if it was the whole crew who have been able to delay, or despite that, they have phones and they're still able with their watches. That is what allows them to keep up socially.
Yeah, these watches are relatively new. They're hit or miss. It's not like they're the only ones, but those conversations have obviously, I mean, they're children. Those conversations have obviously been had. Oh, everyone else has one. Oh, my whole class has one, blah, blah, blah. But they're met with a resounding, I don't care. So they just chose the wrong mom. It is what it is. But there are certain things, again, there's always going to be certain things that people are stricter on than others. And they also know why. And I think that was something I didn't get a lot growing up. My parents were very strict about certain things. And I don't feel like I ever got a lot of answers on why. And when I asked, there was not really, and that to me, um, was not helpful. And I didn't appreciate that, and it bothered me. And so with my kids, I've always talked to them like they're, people. And I've explained to them, and they've watched, some of the documentaries on social media with me. And so they understand it, so they don't really fight me.
I have seen you with your sons, and you are very open and honest with them. And I do like your point about explaining the why, because it is so easy for us as parents to shut them down and say no.
Mhm.
But if they don't understand the why, it's easier for them to continue persisting. But if you tell them why, then they actually have an understanding. They may not agree with it, but at least you're telling them why.
Yeah, I agree. I think it just breeds open conversation. And that's really important to me as a mom, is open conversation. So, and you have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. But it's true. Like, I've always been very open in myself with my kids. And they've always, so far, and I know that could change, but they tell me everything. And so I'll take that for as long as I can get it.
And back to setting the boundaries within the household, I love how you talked about the strategy about working from home, because so many people do work from home now, and it's very hard to separate work life from home life. And if you can be set up in the common area and not have that separation from home and work. So I love how Justin was moved to a separate area so that he's not disrupting the household, but there's a door, right? So that room, that's the location where he's working. And then when he steps outside that door, he's at home, and it's home life mentality now.
Right.
And I think that is an incredible strategy, because it's very hard for people to shift between the two when they're just in a common space, thinking about work and with their family.
It is, and it makes sense. I mean, if you work all over your house and there's no boundaries, especially when you have kids, how are they supposed to know when they can talk to you and when they can't, or shouldn't, or you know what I mean? It's very much so. Now that a lot of people work from home, it is really important to have your space where you can go and, again, tell your kids, hey, I need an hour to do this. And then you and I are going to go do this. I think that is key, as opposed to no, 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 no. And like you said, just shutting them down all the time. Hey, this is an important meeting for me. I have to take this. Why don't we go get ice cream after that, or whatever it is? But I think that provides a lot more happiness and, middle ground in your house.
Yeah. And if you need, setting the alarm. So if you say an hour,
Yeah.
then setting an alarm or a timer for that, so that you are holding up your promise and following through with your kids when that hour is up.
Yeah, it's really important, because otherwise they learn to not trust you, and to not, and that they'll feel like you're always working, you're always putting everything in front of them. And maybe your intention is to have your kids first, but if you're not showing them that, then how would they know?
Nope, they wouldn't at all. Well, Sarah, I've loved chatting with you. I always love chatting with you. We could talk all day long. Final question. What is your biggest takeaway, you would say, in regards to balancing leadership, medicine, motherhood, what is one final thing you can give us?
Yeah, sure. Big question with maybe a big answer. I would say for me personally, I really enjoy doing a lot of different things. And so being able to keep my children at the forefront of everything has always been the most important part to me, with everything else balanced around it. And I think for other people, even writing down what your priorities are is so important, and even keeping it right next to you so that you don't get confused. And the priorities can change every quarter. Your priorities may change, and that's okay. But I think having yourself go through and write down where your priorities stand, because there's no real balance in life. Everyone says that nothing's going to be balanced all the time. That's just not realistic. So, but where you're putting your priorities are important. And then making sure that you're living the way that you're saying that you want to is right after that. So, write down your priorities. And then right after that, make sure that's the way that you are living your life. And that's what I would say is my biggest takeaway at this point in balancing it all.
Thank you. That's such a great strategy. So, for anyone who wants to start right now, they can take out a pen and paper or open the Notes app on their phone and start writing out their priorities right now. That wraps up today's conversation on mastering time as an entrepreneurial household. A huge thank you to Dr. Sarah Breen for sharing her incredible insights on maintaining balance and well-being while running a successful business and household. For more information about Sarah's business, The Epic Fit, visit theepicfit.com. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your biggest takeaways. Share them with us on Instagram at Intentional Household. And if you're ready to take a deeper dive into optimizing your household, visit intentionalhousehold.com to learn more.